Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a lawyer here at Law Mangoji. Many of you probably know me already. And we also have Zia here, who is also another lawyer at our firm as well.
Hi, everyone.
So Zia and I are going to team up and go over this webinar with you. So here's our presentation. Today, we're going to be concentrating on temporary residence, right? If I probably come to a lot of your schools to go over the whole permanent residency routes, etc. Today, we're going to really concentrate on temporary residence, especially for students. We're looking at mostly study permits and work permits, how to get your post-grad work permit and how to maintain your status. Because the reason why we're doing this webinar is because there are quite a lot of new policies that have come out for students that we really wanted to share with you guys. So here, first of all, are some of the conditions of study permits, okay? So first of all, in order to qualify for a study permit, you have to enroll at a designated learning institution, a DLI. If you have a study permit, you would have been enrolled in one of these schools. Now, you have to note that not all DLIs qualify you for a post-grad work permit. And so, you know, we're going to talk a little bit more about post-grad work permits later on, okay? Usually it's the public universities and colleges that will qualify you for a post-grad work permit. The other condition of study permit is that you actively pursue your studies, okay? What does actively pursue studies means? That is a very interesting question, okay? It means that you're going to continue, you're still continuing on with your program. The definition, making progress towards the completion of your program. You can be a part-time student and still be actively pursuing studies, okay? But this could pose a problem later on for post-grad work permits. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Now, your study permit, it becomes invalid in 90 days if you are not actively pursuing studies. 90 days is still, you may have heard a lot about 150 days, okay? We're going to talk about that for authorized leave, okay? But 90 days is still the length of time that your study permit status becomes invalid if you're not actively pursuing studies. Because authorized leave, it still means that you're actively pursuing studies. I have a feeling that this is going to be a point that's going to confuse a lot of students. Okay, so we're going to talk about what authorized leave means. Remember, when you're on authorized leave, it still means that you're actively pursuing studies. So you have 150 days for authorized leave. If you are not on authorized leave, you have 90 days before your study permit status becomes invalid. What does authorized leave mean? This term, authorized leave, has just come out a very short while ago, just before the new year, okay? And right now, before we didn't have this sort of terminology called authorized leave, but IRCC has just come out with this policy that if you have an authorized leave that is approved by your school and it does not exceed 150 days, then you are still actively pursuing your studies, okay? So students who continue to study within like the 150 days when they have active leave, you are still considered to be actively pursuing your studies. Your authorized leave ends though after 150 days. So even if your school approves you to leave the school for more than 150 days, your status will, for actively pursuing studies, is going to end after the 150 days. In that case, you will you should apply to change your status. So say I'm going to be out of school for, a year, okay? And the school approves my leave. That doesn't mean that it's okay to do that. If you are not actively pursuing your studies, your status ends in 90 days. So you need to change your status, okay? Now, if you do too many of these authorized leaves, be careful. They could be interpreted as non-compliance with actively pursuing studies, okay? So for example, you do one active leave for 150 days, then you do another one after a couple months, then you do another one. Well, that becomes a little bit suspicious. Don't abuse this sort of situation. Now, very, very important. Even though you're actively pursuing studies at this point, because you are not a full-time student, you cannot work during this authorized leave period, okay? We're gonna talk about a little bit more about working off of campus, okay? Now, authorized leave, they've also come out when they came out with a policy of authorized leave, they also came out with a policy about changing schools as well, because this has been something that a lot of students have had issues with, and it hadn't really been clarified before. But under this new policy that came out, they did sort of clarify it, okay? So first of all, of course, if your study permit says any DLI, right? And there's nothing on your study permit restricting you changing school. You can change schools, right? Without applying for another study permit, okay? But you should still change on your MyCIC. You should change the DLI on your MyCIC, okay? If you have not finished your program at the first school, you have to start studying at the second school within 150 days. Okay, if it's longer than 150 days, you may need to apply for another study permit or apply for a visitor record in between, okay? So if you're changing programs and you didn't finish your first program, you cannot work during this time that you're changing from one school to another school. But if you have completed your first program, you can work after you complete your program if it's within 150 days and you've already been accepted to the next program, okay? When I'm talking about working, I'm talking about people who don't have a work permit to work otherwise, okay? This is for people who only have the study permit and they don't have any more work permits, okay? So you can, if you haven't finished your program and you want to change programs, you shouldn't be working in between. If you have finished your first program and you're, let's just say I finished my undergrad, and during the summer, I want to be working before my master's. That is okay, okay? Now, let's talk about off-campus work while you're studying without a work permit some more. So, if you're a full-time student, you have to be a full-time student, okay? And you have a valid study permit. You're enrolled in a DLI for at least 6 months, okay? You can work up to 20 hours off campus, okay? And full-time on a regularly scheduled break. Now, the full-time, people say, how much is full-time? Full-time is not set by IRCC. They depend on the school to say how many courses is full-time, what is considered full-time. So when you apply later on for a work permit, the IRCC will look at a letter from the school saying that you were a full-time student, okay? Now, the scheduled break has to be part of the school academic calendar. and the program's academic calendar. It can't just be, oh, okay, so school, can I take a break, right? That's not a break. If the school authorizes you, that's authorized leave. For you individually, that might be authorized leave. But that doesn't mean that you can work during your authorized leave. Remember, we talked about this, okay? If you are enrolled in, so to be able to work full-time, okay, during your authorized break, your scheduled break, authorized, scheduled, there's a lot of here. During your scheduled break, okay, if you're enrolled full-time before the semester and full-time afterwards, you can work during the scheduled break. In your final semester, if you have studied full-time throughout this, but let's just say you have one more course you have to finish, that is okay, okay? And so if you have studied full-time and you only need a part-time course load in the last semester, then you can work full-time. Now, as soon as you receive the school's confirmation that you've completed your program, that is when you are no longer a full-time student. When you receive that, you have to stop working, okay? Now, let's talk about post-grad work permit eligibility. You can only qualify for your post-grad work permit once in your lifetime. So be careful if you've only completed a one-year program, okay? Because, you know, it could only be that you get a post-grad work permit for 1 year afterwards. So be very careful about when you want to apply for the post-grad work permit. If you want to apply for the post-grad work permit, you have to apply within, now, this is interesting, before it was within 90 days. This is all changed right now. That was the reason for our newsletter before. And you know, this is why we wanted to talk to you guys, because it can get a little confusing. Now the new rule is you can apply for your postgrad work permit within 180 days, 6 months of getting that letter from the registrar's office that you've completed all of the programs. Okay. What's also interesting is your study permit is no longer required when you apply for the postgrad, okay? So if you have, as long as when you graduated, okay, you had a study permit at that point, and your study permit, let's say it's going to expire, it's okay. Here's the caveat though, okay? You have to have valid status when you apply for the postgrad work permit, okay? If you are in Canada. So let's take an example. I finished my my program in January let's just say end of December, okay? Make it easy, okay? I have until June, end of June, to apply, 180 days to apply, okay? But when does my study permit expire? Let's just say my study permit expires in March, okay? Can I apply in June? Yes, I can. But I would have had to apply for a visitor extension before my study permit ends in order to apply in June. Let me give you another example, okay? Let's just say my study permit ends this December, and I finished last December, okay? Can I apply in June? Yes, I can apply in June. Without doing anything? No. Why? Because my study permit status, I'm not actively pursuing studies for 90 days, right? My study permit status ends 90 days after my program finishes. So my status ends in March. I would have to apply to extend my status before March, right? Before the 90 days is up, end of March, I would have to apply to extend my status if I wanted to apply for the study permit in June. Are you confused yet? Don't worry. If you are confused, I'm sure a lot of other people are confused as well. We're gonna have some information about how to contact us afterwards as well. We're gonna go through a few more scenarios as well, okay? Now, one more thing is full-time status. It's very important. They have emphasized this on the policies. You have to maintain your full-time status at school during every semester of your program except authorized leave and the final semester. If you just have 1 or 2 courses left, you can do it during the final semester, okay? Let's just say I can't do this course because it's not offered in the final semester. What you should do then is get authorized leave from the school, maybe, to do that. Now, keep in mind, though, the authorized leave, you're still not able to work during the authorized leave, okay? Okay, and as soon as you apply for the post-grad work permit, if you satisfy all of the other criteria, okay, then you can work. Now, if you wait until June and you don't have study permit status anymore, your study permit expires, right? Then you can't work from that period on. If it was me in this situation, if I graduate in December, I think it's probably still worth it for me to apply usually in March. Then I can continue to work, right? But every situation is different. This offers a little bit more flexibility. But don't be confused. It's very confusing between 180 days and the 90 days. Don't be confused. Your study permit status ends after 90 days or when your study permit expires. You continue to need to have temporary status, visitor status, extend your study permit, etc., in order to qualify to apply for the post-grad work permit. Okay. One more thing is, you guys probably would have seen this chart, okay? This is on the IRCC website, okay? Make sure, if you want to get a post-grad work permit when you graduate, you have to make sure that your program offers the post-grad work permit eligible program. Look on this right side, okay? One more thing about the post-grad work permit. The length coincides with the length of your program, okay? If it's 2 years or more, it will be a 3-year work permit. Now, if you complete 2 programs now, okay, you can combine both of the programs together when you're applying for the post-grad work permit, okay? But the programs have to be completed within 2 years. So the first one, if you complete it, the second one you have to complete it within 2 years. So if you complete one program and the second one is another program, is 1 year, both of them together is 2 years, you get a 3-year work permit. The online, they've also given more details about online distance learning. If your program has more than 50% of distance learning, you will be ineligible now for the post-grad work permit. However, if it's less than 50%, then whatever courses you've taken for the distance learning is still contributed towards the length of your program altogether. Okay, so let's just say I took a semester of distance learning, okay, and my whole program is 2 years. That semester of distance learning is still part of the 2 years, and I still am eligible for the 3-year work permit afterwards. However, okay, any program with an overseas component now, they have said clearly, if you are doing overseas studying outside of Canada, even if you get a degree from a Canadian university, that the length of time for the post-grad work permit is only based on the length of time you have studied in Canada. All right, Zia, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, let's run through some scenarios to try to clarify this.
All right, let's do it. So the first situation I have for you, Jessica is a master's student at the University of Toronto and holds a valid study permit. She's been offered a 4-month full-time job from an employer that she did her co-op placement with. So can Jessica take a break from her master's program to work?
Okay, so first of all, we don't know if it's an authorized break, right? If it is an authorized break, if the school says, okay, yeah, we'll allow you to take 4-month break, an authorized break, she still can't work, right? And if she says, oh, I didn't get an authorization from my school to leave, then her status would end after 90 days.
Right. So if instead of taking a break from her master's program, Jessica decides that she wants to study part-time and work full-time, can she work full-time?
So first of all, that's going to be an issue. If you are studying part-time, you are not allowed to work off campus full-time. So that's going to be an issue. Now, maybe Jessica has some way to get a work permit. Maybe, for example, her husband is doing a PhD. She might be able to get a work permit as a spousal work permit. She's able to get a work permit some other way, then she could work full-time legally. But just purely based on her student status, she won't be able to work legally.
Okay, and how does that affect her eligibility for a post-grad work permit?
That's going to be very important. Unless it's in her last semester of study, Jessica will have an issue getting her post-grad work permit if she only studied part-time, for part of her program, if it's not the final semester, okay? If it's something that is necessary because of, illness or something like that, maybe if she explains it, she might get away with it, but it's going to be very, very risky to do so. And I certainly wouldn't advise it if she didn't have to do that.
Okay, wonderful. So our next situation is Samantha takes in an authorized pregnancy leave from her PhD program. After she finishes her leave and goes back to school, she completes her PhD program. Is Samantha eligible for a post-grad work permit?
So if it is an authorized leave and the school allows her to do so, and illness or pregnancy or something is part of the reasons that IRCC has outlined that is acceptable for authorized leave, then yes, if she leaves and then she comes back, she completes her PhD program, as long as everything else is satisfied, and as long as she still continues to study full-time in all the other periods, she is eligible for postgrad work permit.
So our next situation, Josh is enrolled in a diploma program at the University of Toronto. In his first semester of his second year, so it's a 2-year program, Josh decides to take a semester of courses online, and he lives with his brother in Calgary. Is Josh still eligible for a postgrad work permit?
Okay, so very interesting here. First of all, he is taking online courses, so it's only 1 semester in 2 years. So that's not over 50%. So that's fine then, because if you're just, not over 50%, he's still going to be eligible for the postgrad work permit. If it is over 50%, that becomes a big issue.
Okay, great. And so what length, because this is a 2-year program, what length of postgrad work permit is Josh eligible for?
The online course does contribute towards the 2-year program. Just because you do it online, if it's under 50%, it does contribute to the program.
So if I understand correctly, Liz, what you're saying is that because he did a 2-year program and he's eligible for a 3-year post-grad work permit, and that online semester doesn't affect his 3-year post-grad work permit because it was done in Canada.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this presentation. Maybe you've learned something new. If you have any issues, and if you have some further questions, I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if you did. Contact us over here. Let us know if you have any more questions. Okay, take care, guys. Bye.